For many people, having your computer infected with malware or a virus is about the worst thing that could happen to them. In some cases, you might actually have to reinstall your operating system, or in worst cases, completely format your hard drive and start over. And in those worst case scenarios, you might actually lose all of your personal data. So for those of us who've been around for a while, you might have heard of some of the worst viruses in history. Names like MyDoom, Stuxnet, Melissa, I Love You, WannaCry, or even Sasser. When you hear on the news about these viruses, you instantly think about the worst possible case scenario if you were to get infected by one of them. But those viruses, while bad, almost always caused only software problems. As I said before, maybe having to reinstall your operating system, but no physical harm done. Usually they would just infect or damage your Windows PC, ultimately forcing you to reinstall everything and start over, but not the end of the world. But what these mega viruses have not been able to do at scale is cause physical hardware damage. Meaning maybe they would cause excessive wear and tear, or your system to run at 100% and maybe cause extra heat, slow performance, or even shutting down your computer. But there's always been a gap between what a virus can do to your computer and your ability to fix it with the right knowledge. That ends today. There is a new monster virus on the horizon, and believe me when I tell you, this could potentially be the worst virus in the history of mankind. And don't just take my word for it. This is what other experts in the tech industry are saying about the potential of this virus.
A virus with this capability could be the worst virus in the history of computers.
Now, I certainly don't mean to sound so overly dramatic, and I don't make statements like this lightly. So let me explain a little bit about what happens if you actually get infected with this virus. Later in this video, I'll explain steps you can take to help prevent or minimize the chance of you getting infected. Unfortunately, and this is why I made this claim about this potentially being one of the worst viruses in history, your preventative measures will only go so far unless some big name corporations step up and become proactive in the fight against this potential outbreak. This virus is called Lojax. It takes advantage of the same technology that the old CompuTrace software that you know of now as Lojax would use on your computer hardware, hence the name. Now let me briefly explain how this virus works, because it's important that you know what your options are. Every computer in existence has on board what is known as a BIOS chip. BIOS stands for Basic Input Output System. Basically, it's a chip that's either inserted to or embedded into your motherboard, that main board that everything else plugs into, whether you have a laptop or a desktop. That BIOS is responsible for identifying all the hardware plugged into that motherboard, and also helps control the flow of data between hardware and your operating system or software. While BIOS chips can be corrupted as they have in the past, it's usually a pretty easy fix to either reset your BIOS back to defaults or even update it via a flash drive. Unfortunately, the BIOS systems of old were becoming too easy for bad actors to manipulate, so UEFI was created to take its place. UEFI stands for Unified Extensible Firmware Interface. Think of UEFI as BIOS's big brother. Much stronger, much more stable, less easy to pick on. Now, almost all new modern computers now come with the UEFI standard versus the old BIOS, but they all have a BIOS chip embedded into the motherboard. They still need that to be able to regulate data back and forth and identify hardware. They all still need the system BIOS to be able to make sure that everything flows smoothly between hardware and software. So here's the problem. The BIOS chip on the motherboard traditionally has empty spots available inside the chip, that just where no data is actually written. When a BIOS update is applied to your computer, the BIOS manufacturers know this, and they write the updates to just skip over those empty sections. But the Lojax rootkit virus can embed itself into those empty spots that the BIOS updates are just going to jump over. And so even if a legitimate BIOS update is applied, it will never see the Lojax virus hiding right there in those empty spots. So if this happens to you, you now have Lojax installed in your system BIOS, and it is 100% possible that that virus can render not only your motherboard, but your hard drives and everything else connected to your computer absolutely useless. This one virus can literally turn your computer into an oversized paperweight. Now, thankfully right now, Lojax has only been used for some very specific high-value targets, such as the 2016 hack of the Democratic National Convention, global television network TV5 Monde, and even the World Anti-Doping Agency, and many others. So right now the odds are slim that this could happen to you, but as this thing becomes more popular and more widespread, you will hear about it again. So here is how you help prevent yourself from being infected from this nasty virus. First, make sure Secure Boot is enabled in your BIOS. If you're not sure, reboot your computer, go into your BIOS settings, and verify. Secure Boot right now is probably the best defense you have because the people who wrote this virus have not yet figured out a way to get around it.
Secure Boot will not work as a club bouncer forever. It's only a matter of time before hackers find a way to bypass it.
Secure Boot is designed to protect against things exactly like this, and for now it might be enough, but it won't be forever. As Lojax becomes more mainstream, someone somewhere will modify the code to bypass Secure Boot. The bad guys always stay one step ahead of the good guys. Second, always follow best practices when using your computer. Don't click suspect emails, even if you think they're safe. Stay away from emails with attachments unless you are specifically expecting that attachment. Be careful where you surf the web. Just because a website looks legitimate does not mean that it is. Third, make sure you have antivirus installed on your computer. All new computers do come with Microsoft Defender, but given the nature of this virus, I doubt seriously that that's going to be a long-term solution. At minimum, at least go download a free antivirus program. Even if it does have some limitations or some nag screens, it's probably still better than Microsoft Defender. Now, fourth, and probably most important, I would recommend you reach out directly to the BIOS manufacturers that are listed on your screen. These are the people who are responsible for writing the code for those BIOSes. Those are the companies that can easily make changes to upcoming BIOS releases, which can and will eventually prevent Lojax from taking over your system BIOS. What you don't want to happen is to find out you're suddenly infected with the Lojax virus because you didn't follow these steps. At that point, your only option is to try to update your BIOS and pray. So make sure you subscribe to the channel to get updates on this super nasty virus. So if you want to know more about the ins and outs of how this virus actually works at the core level, click this video right here. It's going to take you to my buddy Nico's video that he just released about Lojax, and it will really open your eyes. Thanks so much for watching.